by Jeff Pascal Ochieng. My country has an unemployment problem. By some estimates, between 50 to 70% of Kenyan youth don't have suitable jobs. The available jobs pay minimally, and even those jobs, often people have to acquire through bribery and nepotism. In 2017, my friends trooped to Qatar when it required manpower to realize their lofty ambition for the World Cup. My friends got decent jobs that paid minimum wage. Their dreams came true, and it was the start of a new beginning. During the same period, at the age of 25, I was hospitalized for depression. For us, a job in the Gulf offers respect, dignity, and security. You at once are able to escape unemployment and find security in a 2-year contract that gives you tax-free income, and one would be able to take care of the needs of their family and sometimes even that of the extended family. My mother worked for the IOM in the 90s, and she helped many refugees relocate. I would visit her office and got to understand how basic humanitarian assistance works. That distant memory helped me later while seeking help. After she lost her job and died in 2002, I ended up living with relatives in the slums of Mathare, Nairobi. That is where I joined a children and youth photography club. Most of the friends who came in 2017 were part of this program. I won several awards, and I was also a rising star in film and photography. I worked as a freelance photojournalist right out of high school. The pay was not the best, and it wasn't consistent. There were months I would make money, and there were months I would not make money. I had extended family who were dependents, an uncle who was paraplegic. I had lost both parents before I turned 10. My cousins and uncle were my family. I needed to help them. Paying money to do a job is still a concept not many would understand. I don't understand it myself. I paid a recruitment agent in Nairobi almost $1,600. That is a lot of money in Kenya, enough to start a small business or buy a small piece of land. But both would have taken time to yield profits. I must also add, it is more difficult to convince someone who is a loan shark to lend money to invest in Kenya. They know the risk of default is very high. I borrowed 180,000 Kenyan shillings, promising a 7% interest per month. I had to pay back 12,000 Kenyan shillings as interest alone over 6 to 7 months. For me as a Muslim, that was not something I was supposed to do, but that was the only option I had. My colleagues paid a lot more, so I consider myself lucky. I paid the agent. Her name is Helen Dolly Konya of Mulinya Manpower Agency Limited in Nairobi. But I had never met her until the day before our departure. She arranged everything remotely and set up medical tests. We had to take the test for STIs, tuberculosis, and any other disability that may come in the way of my productivity. We also had to prove we were physically fit. It took 3 long months from receiving the offer letter to securing a flight. On the day of my departure, I was very excited because taking a flight itself was a perk. Something everyone envied and aspired to. I really wanted to join my friends who went in 2017. They went during a good time. They benefited. We grew up together, and hearing their stories, I felt I was missing out on something. There were 10 of us who came together, though we didn't know each other before that day. And we were all going to work as dababs, delivery riders. I had never even ridden a motorcycle before I got the offer. I rode it just once in April when I knew I had to go do this job. Of course, when I landed in Doha, I realized they ride on the other side of the road, and it was pretty intimidating as we are not used to that. Except for me, none of the others were given a contract until we reached the airport. And even the offer letter I was given had no date or signature. We were given a 10-page document including the contract, agency details, visa, and tickets. We were only expected to sign the offer letter at the airport, and they could not even read it then. Only when we reached Doha is when we were allowed to read it. The only reason I was convinced was because I had gone online and checked my visa validity. The visa was issued on 18th March 2024 and was valid until 3rd September 2024. And the employer was stated as Shabwa for trading in food. Seeing the visa online convinced me of its legitimacy. We flew out from Nairobi on a sunny afternoon on the 4th of June 2024 to Sharjah in the UAE on an Air Arabia flight. As soon as we landed, we were segregated, Africans on one area and Asians in another. There were about 500 Africans cramped into a space. Those coming to the Middle East to work and those who were returning after finishing their contracts. They were mostly women from Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and the guards at Sharjah were harsh. We were treated like we were subhuman. We spent the night, around 12 hours at the airport. We didn't eat anything but a small sandwich on the first flight and had to sleep on the floor. On the 5th of June, we boarded a flight at 8 a.m. and arrived at Doha at 8 a.m. It was the first time I was aware of crossing a time zone, as I had slept through the first flight from Nairobi to Sharjah. Touchdown in Doha. I was excited. The airport was clean and organized. Everything ran smoothly. Little did I know that it was the beginning of a nightmare. We spent 8 hours at the airport. If we had spent any more time, we would have been deported back to Kenya. Kennedy Maina, a Kenyan national, was the supervisor, or at least he introduced himself as such. He was supposed to get us from the airport, and he finally arrived. I watched as we passed the glitz and glam of Doha to the industrial area in Rayyan, where it is not as fancy, and it's where people who don't fit in the aesthetics of Doha were housed. It was not as posh and polished, but I came to work and I was determined to make ends meet. I was prepared for success. We got off at Street 644 besides a dumpster. It's a ghetto. It's on the wrong side of town is what my friend who stays in Doha would tell me. But that didn't affect me one bit. We got into a room where we found mattresses on the floor and cornmeal, chicken, and cooking utensils. Kennedy later came with bunk beds and the group of us put up everything. We drifted slowly to sleep with the dreams of a bright future. 10 of us sleeping in one tiny room. At 3 a.m. I was woken up by the call to prayer. I went to pray. The Quran recitation at the mosque had a heavy Bengali accent, and by the time I got back, the sun was out and scorching. The Bengalis and Pakistanis were very interested in us, and though there were misunderstandings and hostilities initially, that later changed to brotherly support. They would offer us meat, fish, Arabic bread, and whatever they had in surplus. Kennedy also told us that we would not be paid for 3 months we were spending to get the license. and the license fee would be deducted from our salaries. 533 Qatar riyals per month for 3 months, and we would only receive 1,267 Qatar riyals in hand. The offer letter also stated that we were not entitled to any food or medical cover. We had carried food from Kenya to last us a couple of weeks: flour, dried fish, and dried vegetables. We were ready for anything. We were to do medical tests on arrival, paid for by the employer. And then, after we got our Qatar ID, we were supposed to sign for driving classes. Even the salary of 1,800 Qatar riyals was contingent on us doing 300 deliveries per month. All the riders we spoke to after we arrived said it was not possible. Kennedy visited us only at night, and he gave promises upon promises for the first 2 weeks. But he later claimed that the Chad partner, Abdul Jidda Idris, was on pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia. He then sent us a video of the boss at a wedding. As the weeks went by, we took every story with a pinch of salt. To get by, we would receive mobile money transfers from Kenya, then convert it to Qatari riyals. The money changers were Kenyan bootleggers who would sell moonshine. That's where Kennedy had taken us. That was a big red flag about Kennedy. I only had 1,000 Kenya shillings. I changed it to 27 riyal. I negotiated with the caretaker and he installed Wi-Fi for 25 Qatar riyals so that I could connect with my cousins back home. With the other 2 riyals left over, I bought 2 cigarettes. 2 weeks in, Kennedy had abandoned us completely. I would walk around in the evening to look for Kenyans or just to look to have a conversation with anyone. I was anxious. I noticed during my walks that I have not seen a female or a child in 2 weeks. It was a very strange world. I spent hours browsing the internet for details about the company, to no avail. Kennedy was nowhere to be found. Our agent in Kenya kept reassuring us that we would soon find jobs. Whenever he called me, he changed his tone. He became more aggressive and threatening. He threatened to have us deported, so we clung to every word he uttered. We lived in fear and uncertainty. Once I reached Qatar, some of my own friends did meet me and tried to help me. I would go out with them, job hunting, and they guided me every step of the way. I clung to my faith. I prayed 5 times a day, hoping for a breakthrough. This was an elaborate plan to swindle Kenyans, fleece them in Kenya, and abandon them in Qatar. Kennedy was one link in this scam. We slowly pieced together information about him. He was fired by a security company and now does illegal deals to survive, we heard. He is also known to be a distributor of moonshine in Qatar. Rumor has it that the reason he is never seen in daylight is because he is undocumented. We were also told that he has a wife and a child who live with him. Qatar is complicit in trafficking and abuse. I would spend hours on the rooftop just planning and budgeting the 1,800 Qatar riyal that was to be my salary. Meanwhile, I had also called 999, the emergency number, and was advised to go to the labor department and file a complaint. That's when a Nigerian friend who also advised me to go to the labor department. I took a friend who I trusted and we went the following day. Kennedy had intimidated everyone and warned us against going there. I filed my case and I was confident I would get a hearing. I would finally meet the employer. I walked all the way to the labor office. It was a 14-kilometer walk in total that took us more than 2.5 hours each way. We risked getting heat stroke in our quest to hold the employer accountable. The Kenyan security at Al Rayyan Labor Office gave us hope. We explained our case in Kiswahili, our national language. I admired the clean and pristine looks of the male guard. I wanted to be a security guard just like him. We felt like our struggle was finally over. I felt like a superhero that I get to solve our problems so we get our jobs and life goes on. 2 days later, I was summoned to the labor office by text message. Upon reaching, I was informed that because I don't have a Qatar ID, I was prevented from seeing any official at the labor office. To this day, I wonder why I was prevented from seeing a judge just because I did not have a Qatar ID. Yet, it was the same government that issued my visa. I had no way of issuing a Qatar ID for myself. It was hard to comprehend. On my second visit, I was given a document written in Arabic by a lady at the labor office to go job hunting with. It was a list of requirements so I could get another employer and a new visa. The employer who brought me to Qatar never showed up. I tried job hunting every day for a month. They would all say the same thing: no ID, no job. I blame the Qatari government for being an accomplice to my stolen dream, because how can an individual or business import labor without proving that he has an office? How can my agent not know that the company doesn't exist? And finally, I blame my desperation. How did I fall for all this? Using a fictitious registered business, Kennedy, Idris, and 2 other Qataris were able to get visas and sell to Kenyan employment agencies. The Qatari police and authorities turned a blind eye also, because they cannot prosecute a fellow Qatari. While companies like this keep trafficking workers, there's even proof of 2 money transfers to Idris on a Qatari account on 8th April and 28th May for sums of 3,500 US dollars and 3,600 US dollars. Even as I pondered over all this, I tried and dropped off my CVs in so many places, but the summer period and the recession in Qatar did not help. Only illegal construction work was being offered. They would promise to pay and disappear after the work was done. Justice is a joke. I became a regular at the labor office. 1 month in the middle of all this, 7 other motorcycle rider candidates were picked up in a truck from the airport and dropped off at our accommodation. We then went from 10 to 17, and we had to sleep in shifts, while others were sleeping on the rooftop. It was so pathetic even by African standards. The accommodation was also not hygienic, with so many of us sharing the space. Of the many organizations I reached out to, just one responded offering to help us. They connected us to a regional rights organization. The two together helped us pay rent for a second room and with the provisions to tide us over the next few weeks. I didn't like the idea of going back empty-handed, but the weight was taking a toll on me. I assumed the role of a leader, coordinating food rations, rent payment, attending to the sick, quelling fights, assigning chores, doing translations, providing counseling, and not forgetting giving basic Islamic teaching to the 2 converts who converted to Islam at the airport in Nairobi. I became loved and hated in equal measure. I was willing to stay and fight to the end. I wanted to sue the company and its partners for engaging in trafficking. I wanted someone to be held responsible. But seeking justice in Qatar is not the easiest of tasks. I called 911 for a non-emergency complaint. I went to the police twice. I went to the CID once. And I finally approached an Al-Fazar officer on the streets. I explained that I wanted to report a crime, but he never wanted anything to do with our complaint. That's when I gave up. On the 2nd of August 2024, I boarded a plane back home. I took one last karak chai, then one last shower, and set off to the airport. I came back broke and broken. I came, I saw, I failed.